All right, so it's 6 o'clock, so we'll get started. Welcome to the third meeting of the Plattsburgh Parking Advisory Committee. Let's first go around the room and take a roll call.
Mary Ann Buckle-Ryder, present.
Michael Bissett, present.
Ethan Vincent, present.
Rodney Brown, present.
Matt Miller, present.
Kate Mahoney-Myers, present.
Levi Ritter, present.
Dave Merkel, present.
Joe Rotella, present.
Can you pass the paper?
Yeah. All right, so I don't have any comments to start out. Does anybody from the public wish to speak on any of the agenda items tonight?
Did we have any minutes?
Yes,
Yeah, I sent them out yesterday along with the...
And on the website, we just got permissions to start actually publishing things. Certain people have permissions to do certain things, and now we actually on the agenda where you'd have the Common Council or you'd have the Planning Board, there's a Plattsburgh Parking Advisory Committee section where it would have the agenda minutes and the link to the YouTube video.
Yep, so you won't have to dig through anything. It'll be right there, clearly visible for everybody. Was there any public comments on any agenda items tonight?
Matt, can you pass me an agenda?
Yeah.
It should be in a pile.
Yeah. All right, so seeing no public comments, we'll move on to the first item, which is a report from Chief Ritter detailing the current statistics for parking enforcement downtown for the past month.
So how unhappy are you making people?
Well, the angry phone calls have dropped off significantly, so.
For the month of February, there were 360 tickets issued, 310 tickets collected on, total fines $7,803.50. This is from February 2018. The tickets issued was 77, tickets collected 75, fines collected $2,837.50. That was probably all related to parking ban for snow removal. One of the questions that would probably be asked is, what was it last month? Just to recap, for January, we had 500 tickets issued, 305 tickets collected, so very comparable collected. And the fines collected was $7,275.75. More fines collected with only 5 more tickets collected on, but we issued about 140 more tickets, probably related to the parking ban for snow removal.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for the chief? All right, moving on.
I did have one question. The overtime parking that you have listed is number 26. Does that include any of the items contained in 3, 4, 5? I guess I don't know how to read that.
I see what you mean.
Okay. I read that. Well, my question's answered.
Yeah.
It wasn't broken down, apparently. I'm just curious as to whether people are, you know, saying over the 2 hours.
Yeah, no, I get what
10
you're saying,
minutes.
because we had talked about, 10 minutes,
Right.
obviously. I don't know. I'll try and find out.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
I do have one other question,
Go ahead.
but I think this is, and I don't know if Chief knows the answer or not. Where do the fines go? Do they go into the general fund? Do they go into a special assessment fund? Do they go into something to, I mean, I was looking at all those videos somebody sweetly sent us, and they said one of the things that made fines more palatable and parking, fees more palatable were the instances where the money collected actually went for that area to improve sidewalks or...
Yeah, and that's actually a big part of gaining public support for changes to a parking system is
Right.
having people see what they're getting for their money. So it goes right back into the downtown. Now currently, and this is because it has been in the city code for a long time, the parking revenue goes directly into the general fund. But we have had discussions about changing that policy where those fines would go into a separate parking fund for that particular purpose. So any money that is left over after the administrative costs of the system are taken care of would go back into programs for the,
For the area.
yeah.
Okay. My other question is this, we're still paying special parking assessment fees in our taxes. What happens with that?
Special Assessment District is also something that we are going to discuss, whether it is a revision of the fees or an abolition of the district altogether. But until we have that discussion, I would prefer to have at least several months' worth of data under our belt once we have a managed paid system in place, so we can determine how much revenue that generates. So we can then determine how much of a reduction the system can stand in the Special Assessment District.
But doesn't that mean that the downtown property owners are actually paying for parking twice? Because they're paying the special assessment and they're gonna have to pay either to park somewhere else or whatever.
For the time being, yes, that is what it means, but that's only a temporary situation.
How long do you estimate temporary to be?
We hope to have a paid system in place by the end of this summer or early fall. Have several months of data by the end of the year. So by early 2020, we can have a serious discussion about what changes to the Special Assessment District are warranted and
So about a
financially
year.
feasible. Yeah,
About
about
a
a year.
And would the paid parking area include the parking lot on Court that borders Margaret?
We'll probably be just making a recommendation on that, I
Because
suspect.
that's the one we're paying for, right? I mean,
That's one of them,
That's
yeah.
one
The
of
Special Assessment District covers all of the city-owned parking lots downtown, within the Special Assessment
so are
District,
they
so,
gonna be covered by the kiosk? I guess that's later on, but
yeah,
they would also be.
yep.
Did I cover everything, Dave? Just
If it's not on the agenda, I'm not thinking about it.
Okay, anybody else, before we move on to number 2? All right, so at the last meeting, the committee recommended that the city pursue any and all options for replacing the current capacity of the Durkee lot, the expectation of most of that capacity being made unavailable with the impending construction. And we put together a PowerPoint showing some of the work we've done since then. And Ethan will bring that up for everybody. Okay, so we'll start with the on-street parking options, and what we focused on here is the transition on several city streets from parallel curb parking to angled parking. And I want to stress that these are only working drafts based on measurements that we've taken. These are not fully engineered and do not represent the final configuration or the total number of spaces to an exact degree that we might be able to expect. So this is what Court Street would look like if we transitioned it to a one-way street and then put diagonal parking on both sides of the street. So the blue sections that you see, those are where the diagonal parking would be implemented, and the figures underneath indicate the length of those sections, the number of spots that we could feasibly fit in those sections, and then the net gain from what the current configuration allows. So if you look at the bottom right-hand corner, currently on Court Street between Margaret and Oak, there are 28 spaces. Based on these diagrams and calculations that we've done, we can fit up to 56 spaces with diagonal parking, and that's a net new space of 28 that we get right there.
So this would turn court obviously into this one lane going one way, as well as all these assumptions are built with that the angled parking right now is at 45 degrees. There's different ways to build different angled parking which need different kind of space. But right now this is the 45-degree angle. So that's another reason why Matt said this is a working draft only, not a final design, because we get an engineer to look at it and we spend more time working on it. Maybe we could figure out if there's ways to add more, just figuring out the technical aspects. So 45-degree angle parking is what we're looking at with these designs.
So that's Court Street, and we'll move on to Brinkerhoff Street. Similar concept to Court Street. Brinkerhoff Street would be turned into a one-way street with one lane of traffic in the center with diagonal parking on both sides. And again, it would be selected areas based on the access points that exist on the street right now, such as Marion going up to the north. And if you look at the bottom, the current spaces for parallel curb parking on Brinkerhoff are 33. Based on this diagram, we can add up to 52 diagonal spaces, and that's a net gain of 19 new spaces on Brinkerhoff Street between Oak and Margaret. And we'll move on to the concept for Oak Street. And again, like the other two, this one would actually involve only diagonal parking on one side of the street. Oak Street would remain as a one-way street, but the traffic lane would be reduced to a single lane. Is that correct, Ethan?
Yeah, so it depends once again based on what angled parking you use. With the 45-degree angled parking, the drive lane would be larger than the lane is already on Oak Street. Right now it's about, between the two lanes, they're average about 12 to 14 feet per lane. So it'd be about the same size of that drive lane. So it'd be parallel, drive lane, a little bit of a buffer zone, angled parking.
So for all these examples they've shown us so far, there would only be one travel lane in each example. So if somebody's backing out of a space, it is stopping any traffic. So there's not two travel lanes.
Yeah.
Correct, yeah.
That-
And if you look at the bottom, again, for this area of Court Street, there's 36 on-street spaces on that side of the street. We can fit 57 with the diagonal parking configuration that Ethan just described. So that's a net gain of 21 spots on Oak Street in the area that you see here.
Just point of clarification, the buffer zone, does that allow for somebody to back out into that so that they're not disrupting traffic?
Based on the size, it wouldn't be a full back out and then forward, but there would be a zone between the driver. It wouldn't immediately back right into the actual lane of traffic. There would be a buffer, that little bit of a buffer zone.
Right, but that's what I've seen in other cities. If it's wide enough for them to back out parallel to parking, then they won't be disrupting the traffic.
So most of Oak Street is around 42 feet. So there's only so much you can build in because you have about 9 feet or so for the parallel on one side. And then for the 45-degree angle parking, you're going to need pretty much an aisle width of around 18 feet. Depending on the angle. So once again, if you use 60-degree angle parking, that changes the dynamics a little bit. Gives them, maybe it might be easier to back out, but it loses that drive lane strength.
Gain us about 50 spaces, but I wouldn't want to say exactly where it was.
Sure. Okay. Okay, so those are the three options that we're currently looking at for the installation of diagonal parking for on-street parking. And now we'll move on to the options that we are looking at for the Glens Falls / Margaret Street parking lot. So just to give you a quick update on where we are at with the demolition of the Glens Falls building. Today, KAS, who was the contractor that the city brought on to do the pre-demolition asbestos survey, did their sampling work today at the bank. The city should have those results within the next 2 to 3 weeks. The results of that testing will be built into a larger RFP for the actual demolition of the building, which we hope to accomplish over the summer. Now, this is a concept that would involve consolidation of not only the existing Glens Falls parcel, but the closure of Division Street and the incorporation of the existing parking lots for St. John's Catholic Church and Community Bank all into one contiguous lot.
Where do we stand on any negotiations with that, though?
Well, I had a discussion with the church this afternoon. We didn't have a chance to update this afterwards, but the church is not interested in a discussion about consolidating the lot. And based on the geometry, it doesn't make a great deal of sense to consolidate just the Glens Falls parcel and the Community Bank lot. So we're currently in further discussions with Community Bank about some type of shared use agreement, but those are ongoing and I'll keep you guys updated.
So this really isn't worth looking at right now?
Yeah, this is a concept that currently doesn't have any applicability, so.
Without the consolidation, how many lots would there be?
Ethan, you want to go to the next slide? Okay, so this
That
is.
doesn't look as good, man.
Yeah, I know. So this is what we can fit if we use only the Glens Falls parcel and then close Division Street and then carry that new parking lot to the border of the properties with St. John's and Community Bank.
I thought there was 189 spaces that were gonna go there.
No, there's 109 in that
That's what was proposed earlier,
footprint.
though.
There was a 168 that involved.
Yeah,
portions
we've
of
looked at
both.
5 or 6 different configurations for this. What we're trying to show you now is the options that we are reasonably confident we can implement without getting the cooperation of other property owners or other entities. These are solutions that we are confident we can implement without any further discussions with anyone.
Building a parking garage is off the table.
The parking garage, based on the cost estimates that we've received, is currently off the table. After a few years of a paid system, when we have a general idea of how much revenue we can expect to be collected on an annual basis, we get a sense of how much of a long-term debt service that revenue can cover. Then the conversation regarding multi-story structure, we can have that, but
But in 2 to 3 years, the cost of building a tiered parking lot may go up to $3 million.
it might.
So why not bite the bullet now? We're trying to spread out. I mean, you're making Court Street one way and Brinkerhoff one way, where people coming into town, they get frustrated, they say, the hell with it, I'm going somewhere else.
Parking at that one.
Nowhere to park. I just think the angle parking and making Court Street one way, bite the bullet and get bonded, whatever, tiered parking.
Is there a possibility the county might look at building a garage on the county lot? After all, it is kind of the county employees that are going to be impacted most.
Well, I'm not sure that the Department of Social Services employees would appreciate the walk from the government center over to that facility, so I'm not sure that that would be the answer. This is a much more centralized lot. I'm just not sure that the ownership that the city has lends itself to a cost-efficient parking structure.
Yeah, the geometry of the parcel itself limits us with what we can put on, and we would also have to maintain an above-ground right-of-way on the current footprint of Division Street because there's a primary sanitary sewer line that runs immediately under that. So we can't build a structure on top of it,
Okay.
which limits our options.
So the county's not considering a parking garage because they don't want social services to have to walk a block?
No, that's
Frankly, it's more than a block, Mary Ann.
Not that
In the middle of winter, I think that is a difficult walk to make. We are
I don't
looking.
know, I'm renting a lot and I have to walk.
But Bridge Street and Broad, there's already, I don't know.
Yeah, and listen, that solution does not help all of the people who are going to restaurants at this end of the street, all the businesses that are at this end. I don't think that's the best solution, is putting a parking garage there. Listen, we may have to consider it ultimately if none of these other solutions work, but I'm not sure that that's the best solution right now at that location.
How many people are social services?
At social services, there is 160 employees.
193.
Okay, so that small lot right there
We have 109 at Glens Falls.
takes pretty good
care of that
Takes a good
alone.
shot of that.
The small lot.
The small option that we just looked at.
Yeah, the
West Falls
109.
site.
Well, I would say that the small lot there plus the lot over on Broad Street together,
So
yes.
how many spaces are we short with your lots for your main campus? Or your other campus, I should say.
Well, we're not short at all.
Broad
So
Street.
you have plenty there.
We have plenty there for our county employees and visitors. We don't have enough for juror parking.
So you're short.
Well, it's not our responsibility to provide juror parking.
But
That's
it's
the
not the
state's
city's
responsibility, so we're not short.
Well, I shouldn't say you're short. Let me rephrase it. We're short there.
There's a shortage of parking overall on the days that are jury pools.
Yes, I would
Yes.
agree.
How many days do you have
Having
juries?
gone to
3, 4 a month?
The primary jury calls, it's about 3 or 4 a month.
4 month at the most.
Yeah, I would say at most, and how many of those actually occur, I don't know. You know what I mean? A lot of those get, yeah.
Are we
Canceled.
filling, or your lots getting filled to capacity?
I would say on days that there's no jury pool, we have maybe 20 spaces vacant.
Okay.
Usually in our Oak Street lot, not in our main lot, next to the government center. We have a Oak Street lot a little further down.
And then, but when we have when they pull a jury, we have an idea number-wise, 40, 50 spots short, 100 spots short.
I would say it's probably 50 to 60 spots short. Now, you could call a couple of jury pools at the same time if you got more than one trial going on. You may have as many as 200 being called, but those are unusual.
That's very unusual.
Yeah.
I'd say it's more on average about 20, 30 spots maybe,
Rodney,
and they usually park in my lot.
does the county entertain the idea of going with the city and building a tiered parking lot?
I can say that we have active discussions with the city going on. We're hoping, you have to understand how expensive a structured parking lot is. I don't think either the city or the county wants to saddle our taxpayers with that kind of cost. However, that's not off the table.
But on the flip side, when the city sold that property to the Vermont developer to build 14 Durkee Street, they had to replace the footprint of the building with tiered parking, and they did. Well, if they can absorb that, a private enterprise, and the upper levels, whatever, to replace what the footprint took care of, the lower levels, they charge for it, so what stops us from doing that? I mean,
$5-6 million, that's what stops us from doing that.
Spend $5-6 million.
How many spaces does that buy?
It's about $25,000 per parking space for a parking structure.
That's, yeah, pretty average.
Cheap.
Yeah, but
That's for a parking structure.
That's open top numbers, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
then
that's
you have
without
a
a
maintenance issue.
That's exactly right.
And that's,
That's
yeah.
why I'm sitting here is.
It's also the ongoing
Construction,
maintenance
how do we take care
cost
of
of a multi-story structure versus a surface lot. It's exponentially larger.
But if the city's gonna grow, we gotta bite the bullet sometime. Why not bite it now?
Well,
2, 3,
if
4, 5 years down the road, we're talking $3-4 million more.
Joe, I agree. If we can't find a solution with surface parking, we're going to have to do that. I think we should exhaust any opportunity to solve the problem with surface parking.
And I agree with Rodney on that one.
Short of that, I agree. That's not off the table.
I just think that what we're doing in the Durkee Street parking lot, we're moving the farmer's market, keeping the parking. Move it down there by the train station, that big lot, we got plenty of parking for people to go to the farmer's market. Have the parking there. Does the developer, is he gonna provide enough parking spaces for his property?
Yeah, that was one of the prime requirements that we put in the RFP. They have to include enough parking on their development to take care of their own needs.
Okay.
And one of the items at the bottom, and this is the list of the options that we're looking at, the post-construction publicly available parking on the Durkee Street development, the developer has indicated their willingness to set aside a certain number of spaces for public use once construction is complete. Now we are still in negotiations about what that figure is going to be, and I don't want to quote it here.
Okay, how much space is the farmer's market taking up? How you want to move in parking lot?
Oh yeah, the farmer's market, assuming the development goes through, that building will have to be either demolished or disassembled and reassembled at a different site.
You know, farmer's market's what, 2 days a week?
Mm-hmm.
People park every day. We got that big parking lot. And we have walking trails, what's the big deal about walking, you know, I mean, that's.
Yeah, and we've
I don't get
had
it.
discussions with farmers market leadership, and the primary option we're looking at is moving them down to the marina area, where there is all
Which
that
is near where you're
parking
talking.
available.
I know
Yeah.
what you mean, you know, I
Mhm.
understand. But I just think that, you know, we're gonna go back and forth. We tried angle parking on the upper end of Court Street by the senior center there, the old MAI. That didn't work.
Yeah, but that was, you had to back into those spots.
No, you pulled in and you backed out.
They were back in and pull out.
I've heard that was back in, yeah.
It was back in and pull out.
Back in.
They were reverse.
The stripes are
Which,
still on
from
the
a,
street.
Yeah.
a purely statistical standpoint, is less subject to accident, but it's a very awkward thing for people who aren't used to backing up into a parking space to do on a more or less regular basis.
I just think.
At some point, they gotta back up. They either
Yeah.
gotta
Listen,
back in or they gotta back out.
the county's had angle parking lot in our parking lot for 15 years. It can work.
Yeah, but it's not.
Yeah, that's in a lot though,
It's
that's not on the
It's
street.
on the lot, right, not in the street. where
You
it's
still have to
parked.
pull out, not hit another car that's coming on the travel
Yeah.
There's no
lane.
traffic, you're just going in and out.
There's traffic in the parking lot, Marianne. It's not a street, I
This is
agree.
your,
Streets
your
all
lot
the
over here? You're saying?
Government Center and the Oak Street are both angled parking.
Oh, the newer lot,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, it's not.
Yeah, but that's not like you have to worry about.
I agree, it's not the same, but there's angled parking in lots of
We missed the last
cities.
meeting, you know.
If they can do it in other cities, we can do it in Plattsburgh.
Court Street is not really a busy street. You have stop signs and.
All right,
and
Carol,
parking is
I'm
no
sorry,
noise.
but,
Yeah.
yeah.
You know, I don't know, I'm just all in favor of tiered parking. Do it now and get it over with. I mean, there's some cities that have tiered parking, they've added more, you got Winooski building tiered parking. I mean, let's just do it right, I mean, instead of having parking scattered everywhere, you do
Well-
an aerial view of Plattsburgh will be dotted with parking
You-
lots all over the place.
Joe, you can make the argument that more parking spread out is better than all your parking at one location too. Because you can be closer to where you want to go.
Could be a building in there with a business.
I'm not saying that what you're saying is a bad idea. I'm just saying it's on the table. I think that we should look at other solutions before we settle on that one.
Yeah, I think just from a financial perspective, we have to exhaust all other options before
Why do we,
looking
who
at
says
that.
we have to?
Prudence?
Anybody else? Council, the mayor, I mean, come on.
But she knows.
Yeah, no, this is the feedback we've gotten from the mayor and the council, that
Then why do we have the committee?
because
Why don't they make up their own mind and do what they want to do? I mean, I'm serious.
You want to vote now on when to tiered parking?
Now, but I'm just,
Can't we explore other alternatives?
we can explore them. I don't know, just, we
There's
very.
other alternatives that won't cost the county money, let's go on.
Yeah, all right, and so,
Move on.
all right. Okay, so Rodney, you want to talk about any options that the county's looking at for?
The county is looking to reconfigure our lots and remove some impediments to parking in islands. We think that we can create an additional 45 spaces in our two lots at the Government Center and the Oak Street lot. We also are looking at the purchase of additional lot that would give us another 50, approximately 50 parking spaces. Now, that's more than we need for our employees of the Government Center complex, but it is needed on days that we have jury pools. And, you know, over time, if we have more visitation to our facilities, we should make sure that we have enough parking for more visitors as well. So those are our alternatives that we're looking at. In fact, we probably will, if the legislature approves, we'll probably reconfigure our lots this summer to add those additional 45 parking spaces. Now, that doesn't do anything for Department of Social Services down on this end.
That gets you close though with it, when you have.
Yes.
Yeah.
It certainly helps with the jurors.
And that reduces the burden on all the on-street parking, which is important to realize. As we manage the parking system, there's less people, let's say the jurors that need to park on-street because they have more spot on the county lot, it benefits everyone.
I might have mentioned this at the first meeting, but if you look out from the Government Center towards Margaret Street on any given day during the middle of the day, during a workday right now. There's several spaces available on Margaret Street. Before the implementation of the parking enforcement, starting in January, those were all filled. And they were filled largely by county employees. County employees were parking closer to the building because there were no detriment to doing it. It was free, and they were parking there. We now have more spaces in our Oak Street lot filled because the people who are parking on the street or in Court Street lot are now parking in the county parking lots. So from that perspective, it has already worked to free up spaces on the street.
All right, so looking behind you, everybody, this is, and again, based on what we can say with a relative degree of confidence are the spaces that we can find. The Glens Falls lot, that's 100 new public spaces that haven't existed before. There's a 28 space addition on Court Street, 19 net new spaces on Brinkerhoff, 21 on Oak. The on-street parking adjacent to the Durkee Street parking lot, this would be on Durkee Street itself and any changes along Bridge Street. We left that as to be decided simply because there are too many unknowns with that configuration to say with any degree of certainty how many spots we might be able to gain. And as I mentioned before, we're currently in negotiations with the Durkee Street developer to set aside a certain number of spots on the completed development that will be available for public parking.
So Matt, you've previously said that the only parking that they would provide would be parking for the demand that they would be creating with their development. So this is progress. It sounds like there's active discussions of them providing more spaces that would be available to the general public.
Yep. The developer prime companies, they recognize the parking is a very sensitive issue for the city, and so they have, as we have heard, this is their reputation from prior municipalities that we spoke to who have worked with them. They do go out of their way to accommodate the needs of the cities in which they work. So they are trying to set something aside because they understand that it's very important to the residents and business owners here in the city. So with those figures up there, and again, discount the 222, that gets us about a little shy of 180 new spaces that we can create. And we've got about 100 to get to the full 289. But again, that's going to be reduced because of any public parking that's made available on the Durkee site, any new parking that the county might be able to find in its lots, and continued reach out efforts to private lot owners and other avenues we are currently exploring. So that's where we're at right now, and of course we will continue to give you guys regular updates on how these plans are progressing.
So the on-street diagonal.
So we're actually short 100.
Currently, yes.
Without assuming.
If you can buy the diagonal parking, we're short 100.
Yeah, but if the
Yes, but that's subject
the
to
county's able
ongoing efforts.
to gain a net, say,
Yeah, but
we're
that's
talking about
not-
60, 70,
Yeah, that doesn't
70
count, though.
with reconfiguration.
Well, it would be a total of 100 if
100.
we're successfully getting, purchasing a lot and
But forget the
reconfiguring
lot,
it.
just talk about.
Just reconfiguring 45 spaces.
Okay, so you get 45 there. And then, obviously, there's some, you know, we're talking a net gain of 68 with diagonal, but again, it's kind of a gimmicky thing to some people, which I would tend to agree. And so it might work on some streets, might not work on others. So we still should look for other options.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Just,
We're not
just in case, because it might work on Brink, but it might not work on Oak. You know, we've tried it before, unsuccessful. I would agree with Rodney too, though. They do it other places and it works, but it's different backing out into a diagonal parking in the parking lot.
I would say
Diagonal
Oak
parking.
Street's the toughest one.
That's correct. But we should still be looking for some
Oh,
more
yeah,
spaces.
yeah,
And not
we're
taking
still
those
looking.
diagonal spaces for granted.
yeah.
Because I have a feeling there's gonna be a lot of upset people. And then by reconfiguring the parking lot helps a lot.
So do you need a motion on this?
No, I just think that I think that
'Cause I
research needs to be done to look at other options.
Just informational. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the motion could be that, you know, the city continues to explore any and all options, or you can just treat this as an informational update and move on to the next item.
Good.
just move on?
Sure.
Everybody okay with that?
I assume that the angled parking will be the prime topic of an upcoming meeting at some point?
Yeah. Yep. All right, so item number 3, discussion on the draft RFP for the parking kiosk system. Has everybody had a chance to read through this?
A little dry.
Yeah, most RFPs are.
I'm not the most exciting writer in the world. So like you have the beginning, which is just the background. So I would just get the generic stuff. Hey, we're the city of Plattsburgh. We have X amount of parking spots. We're looking to begin a managed parking system as per the demands of the Common Council. So that just explained it. The beginning just explains that. What we're really, stuff that we're gonna really need to figure out is where we want these kiosks, essentially the boundary for the kiosks to go, how are we gonna want the kiosks to work, what kind of payments should they accept, should it be tickets, should it all be phone, those are the kind of details we can work on now. We're not really setting like, hey, we're gonna spend X amount of dollars. This is just to get out, once again, to get bids for different companies to say, this is a solution. These are our suggestions for a solution for your parking problems. And then we as a committee would review those proposals, grade them like we would do any other RFP, and then we would make a motion, pass it forward, and if it was approved, it would go to the Common Council. Pretty much like every other RFP the city does. So, exciting stuff.
So are you going to go section by section, or how are we going to do this?
Ethan, you want to go through?
Yeah. So I don't think we really need to go through the introduction or background, unless anyone really wants to make any comments or add any extra language there. So I guess the first thing is where we would put this. The language I put is paid parking boundary, but the managed parking system. So when I was writing this, my assumption was because the Common Council's goals would eventually reduce or eliminate the special assessment district, it makes sense that the paid boundary would be essentially the special assessment district as it exists now, which is the majority of downtown Oak to look right across Veterans Bridge. It involves Pike Street right there. It's at the end of the appendix. Go back to the computer. Okay. So I guess the question is, what do we want to do with setting that boundary? Is there any adjustments to that, do we think? Is that rational? No comments?
Yeah, my thought was that if we're going to be discussing changes to the special assessment district, it would be helpful to have data that is based on the same footprint when we're talking about revenue collected.
Is this a different, or is this the same as the special?
Yeah, this is the same as a special assessment. So the way this is written, the boundaries of the managed system, the paid system would be coterminous with the boundaries of the SAD up there, except for that little section on the other side of the river, which, according to the city chamberlain, we do not collect SAD revenue from. That's just an abnormality with the map.
I'm sorry, I might be the only one having trouble seeing that, but could you review the boundaries?
Yeah, so the area that's shaded in purple, that's the current area that's covered by the special assessment district. So all property owners within that district pay an annual levy to the city to account for the cost of maintaining the parking lots within that district.
So we got Oak Street going all the way up here. We got Cornelia Street. We go on to US 9 around City Hall Place, past right where we are now. We go down Bridge Street. As Matt said, we're not going to continue any further because that's an abnormality. So it would cover anything on the, let's say it covers anything on the Turkey Street site, covers the Broad Street lot, it covers a couple of those parcels right there where like Warren Tire is, which would be pretty much right here, and those apartments there. So I guess one adjustment we could make is having the boundary be Broad Street there, but include this lot right here. Is one suggestion. That there's no on-street parking here or publicly available off-street parking. So even if there was a managed parking system there, it really wouldn't impact those properties.
So what does everybody think about the boundaries for this?
How is the parking, I'm not all that familiar, I'm familiar on Brinkerhoff Street, but during the day, for the Couch Street, Court Street, west of Oak Street, so as you're going toward the college, how's parking there? Does anybody know?
It's all residential though.
I
Yeah.
know. I can't say anything.
How full is it, or how is it?
Yeah, I mean,
regulated?
is there quite a bit of parking there, or is it pretty filled with cars during the day, Monday through Friday during a weekday?
During college, I'm sorry.
No, yeah, go ahead, Carol.
Okay, I lived there. During college, Brinkerhoff, Oak, Couch, they're all full of cars. And part of the problem in speaking to other cities is that they don't have the college problem we do. So when we're trying to create a parking plan, we're gonna have a problem because college students, even I went to college students, park throughout the day. They don't just park at night. I think that.
Their cars are there all day, most of the day.
And they stay there, they walk to class.
It's on the drop
So-
off. This is the.
So you're gonna have a problem if you don't work this into your plan, because the angle parking on Brinkerhoff and Court and all that, a lot of those between the senior center and the college students, they're all gonna be full. So even though you're creating more, I'm gonna tell you, they're all gonna be eaten up by visitors for the college.
Well, they may not be if they're paid parking.
Yeah.
But part of the discussion was not having paid parking on Court and Brinkerhoff, and so I'm just saying.
Well, west of Oak Street? Yeah,
West of
I mean, the
Oak Street.
proposal is not to do anything west of Oak Street here, but that's why I asked the question, how many cars were there?
And Carol, I think an important distinction to make is the demand that you're talking about, all of the parking, that demand is based on a system in which parking is provided for free. You
Correct.
change that and the demand changes with it.
But keep in mind, if you have paid parking required west of Oak Street, all those properties are grandfathered in with insufficient parking. And all those college students that cannot park off-street, there is no place to park. They're all gonna be
Yeah,
inclined
well,
to
the proposal was not to have paid parking west of Oak Street. That, at least.
Currently, yeah.
That map showed that there was no paid parking. I just wondered, I'm wondering the ramifications of having paid parking in the area that was shaded, what impact that might have.
Yeah, so it's a spillover effect.
West
So
of
if
Oak
you're
Street.
charging here but not charging here, how many people choose to park
I
here
don't-
and walk
okay,
rather
So
than?
from that perspective, I think that you need to consider talking to St. John's about the Oak Street, the Couch Street parking lot, because I think that's where we can resolve that problem. I won't say anything right now, I'll let you move on.
Okay, and what Ethan has brought up here, this is from the parking study that Carl Walker completed last year. This is the raw data, but it shows the percentage use of
What
most
does
of
that
the
show,
streets.
Matt?
What's that? Yeah.
What does that show?
That shows the number of spaces that are used at different times of the day based on firsthand observations and what level of use that indicates for the street as a whole. So you're
Based
looking
on
at
no enforcement,
no
That
enforcement,
was done
yes.
before the enforcement, yeah.
This was
Which-
done before the enforcement.
basically throws this out the window.
Well, to a certain degree, but not completely.
It does show where people prefer to park.
Yeah, but
It is good information to have.
So the red is the highest use.
Yeah, it's kind of
Yes.
like a heat scale, the way John had set this spreadsheet up.
So Clinton Street, Margaret Street to Marion,
Yeah,
Marion
Clinton's
Street to
jammed
Oak
up.
Street.
At 12 o'clock on that, on September 20th was filled. So that's the distinction.
Mhm.
Margaret Street to City Hall Place. Yeah, and Dave, I think it was David just said that, the point is well taken, because I really think that has changed fundamentally since they've implemented the parking enforcement official for the city.
So any further conversation on the boundaries that we should set for the RFP for the paid system? Is everybody comfortable?
you won't be changing the boundaries of the special assessment district. You're just talking about a parking.
Yeah, telling whoever responds to this RFP what kind of footprint they should plan
Look at,
to implement their system on.
Well, if you did the east side of Oak Street, why wouldn't you do the west side? And I understand because there's nobody there paying special assessment district taxes on the west side, but I would think that, you know, one side of the street you're collecting on, the other side you're not.
I wasn't suggesting that you wouldn't collect on both sides of Oak Street. I was just
Well,
saying west of Oak Street.
But the way the district is now, it stops, so that's why I'm saying that I would say you want the whole breadth of Oak Street as part of the.
I would say it makes sense on both sides of Oak
Yeah.
Street.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
I have another question for you. City Hall Place, are you looking at doing diagonal parking there?
Not currently, no.
Because it's Route 9?
That and,
You got the Empire State Trail. going
yeah, we
through
got the
that
Empire
bike
State
path.
Trail, which is gonna require a dedicated bike lane
I think
through.
we should just make that a walking street anyway.
Yeah.
so I would think any street that's a border street of the special assessment district, we should include both
Both sides.
sides. So
Both sides of the
Cornelia
street.
Both sides of
Broad
Cornelia.
Street.
Right.
I agree.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so let's do this one piece at a time. So the proposal is that the RFP include a footprint that is coterminous with the special assessment district with the stipulation that paid parking be managed on both sides of the border streets. Can I get a second for that? Ethan? Further discussion on that proposal?
So the parking lot next to the florist shop
Mm-hmm. That's the,
and whatever that is, Lower Cornelia Street, I guess, where the old bridge used to go.
Mhm.
Are there any parking spaces there? Not in the lot, but on the street. So they should be
I would
included.
have to check.
I would think they should be included.
So we're gonna expand it, okay, so.
Well, it's the street, it's Cornelia Street, so.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
Can we look out the window?
Yeah, you can look right.
Yeah,
And
there
this
are a few
excludes
spaces
Miller?
on the street, yeah.
This excludes Miller Street?
Yes.
Yeah.
At least on the way this is set up. right?
Yeah, it would end at Cornelia.
I mean, so if we wanna really think about pushing it further that way,
And this is-
that's our purview.
This is not to say that this is the final way that the system's gonna look. If we implement them and we find that there are significant spillover effects into the surrounding streets, we can discuss the possibility of an addition that would extend managed paid parking to the adjoining streets to take care of it.
I just think that the Miller Street, or at least a portion of it,
By the post office.
yeah, should probably be included, maybe like have 10-minute spots in front of the post office, but I've heard complaints that people who work for the post office park there all day.
Yeah.
And so
Mhm.
they're, you know.
You don't
they're
mean that,
hogging
do you?
those- Pardon me?
You don't mean that, do you?
I don't mean that.
A lot of them park up on Mill Street Brothers, some park on Cornelia, like by Press Republican,
Yeah.
they don't have any parking.
It's more of an enforcement issue, wouldn't you say, Chief?
Yeah.
I don't see this massive abuse of those spaces by employees.
They're,
I got.
You
called
don't,
out.
but your people working probably.
yeah,
do.
when you try, when you,
Not consistent, I mean, you see, well, I see what you see. I see them parking all the way up or in spaces where there is no enforcement.
I can
like
name
the
5 cars. I can't give you the plate numbers, but I can name 5 cars,
Yeah.
at least.
So, at any rate.
Yeah.
I got a call
Yes.
about that. in this-
No.
Yeah.
Yes, there are.
Yeah.
Okay, so does anybody else think we should include the kiosk system on Miller Street?
Or-
I think you could include it as an alternate in the RFP.
To Elm?
Elm or whatever, the Lorraine. I don't
Lorraine
know.
is
Lorraine
probably,
is probably
Lorraine.
as far as you
but
can
is it
go.
really worth it if you're just gonna put in some signage there and cover it with enforcement? I mean, your enforcement officer's there, so you're asking for an extra kiosk to cover that one section, or is there one that's gonna?
Well, if you
if
put
we
one
have-
on the corner here,
If we
It
have the
could,
kiosk
yeah.
system, we probably are.
Part of the fitness
If it's already there, then yeah, it would be easy if you're just gonna have one on the corner.
The only problem, the post office, just think about that. Post office is struggling to stay in business, and if you make it paid parking right in front, I think that maybe there's a.
downtown's struggling to stay in business.
That's gonna come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's already here.
But what we haven't decided is how much, if we allow it at all, how much free time there might be. If we said it's the first half hour is free along there, that might be enough for people who are using the post
you could-
office.
Yeah.
That's right, you could resolve that. Just keep that in mind for that particular location.
Yeah, and the beauty of a kiosk system is you can set different rules for different zones at different times. It's easily programmable
I
based
just think it was an
on prevailing
alternate to
trends.
throw it in. We're only asking for a
It's not a bad
price, right?
idea. That is
Yeah,
pretty
Miller
busy.
Street. Okay, so Miller Street up to what point?
Lorraine.
All right. Okay, so I'll amend my previous motion to include Miller Street up to Lorraine as a footprint for the RFP. Can I get a second for that? And otherwise coterminous with the SAD.
I'll second. Oh,
Okay. Further discussion?
But both sides of the border streets,
Both sides of the border streets, yeah.
okay. And so the Miller Street is an addendum or an alternate for it? It's
Yeah,
not-
and
We
how-
don't want them to only give us that with it in, we want to see in or out.
Right.
That's what I was proposing anyway.
So kind of the language would be like first.
Okay, yeah, we'll say-
It's an alternate. When you bid something, it's an alternate.
Yeah.
Yeah, how much extra?
Based on your professional expertise, do you feel that it is warranted to include Miller Street up to this point in the?
And how much
Aren't we
additional
asking them
cost would there
for a
be?
price for a system?
Yeah, we're asking them for a price, and yes, it's possible that they would try to pad their bill.
It might be a zero add too, based on the location of the
Could be another
kiosk.
button
Depending on where
on
you
the
put the
machine,
kiosk.
Yeah, if you
another,
put the
Yeah.
kiosk close enough, it's just a matter of signage, and then you're, saying that you're in this district, so.
Mhm.
I'm looking at it right now, it's.
Okay, so coterminous with the SAD, enforcement on both sides of the border streets, Miller Street up to Lorraine. That's the motion. Rodney seconded. Any further discussion before we vote?
I just got a problem with Miller Street, because you go up to, on the east side, you got Lorraine, you gotta go up further to hit, say like one or two apartment buildings, then you hit Elm, so it's not parallel. And there's residential there, it's got a problem with residential. That's, because I know those places, again, like, a lot of their grandfather, they don't have the required parking for the tenants.
Virtually everybody on Miller Street, though, that is residential, has a driveway.
Yeah, but if
Right up
there's,
to
how
it,
much
Lorraine.
parking in back, I mean, I know the building on the corner of Elm and Lorraine on the west side, they've got parking in back, but some of the other ones don't.
Yeah, but they're on Lorraine, so they're gonna be able to park.
Yeah, I mean,
on
You
Lorraine.
can, also adjust that limit, like Matt's saying, we can adjust it with parking signs.
Right. we
So you
always-
can
we
stagger,
always
you
pull it
can
up a little
stagger
bit.
those.
Yeah.
You know,
Let's
look-
do it, we nickel down to people, if you're going to.
just ask them for a price.
You
Yeah,
can ask
just
them
ask them for
for,
a
you ask
price.
them for a price, and you're talking, like I said, again, a 2-hour
We're gonna
parking
adjust
sign,
that.
or you're
That's-
parking
that's
within
fine.
a metered
Okay.
parking area.
All right, so why don't we request them to propose a system for the SAD as it is with both sides of the border streets, and then request that they also include the cost of extending it up Miller Street to Lorraine.
Gotta go with that.
I think that's what we had asked.
We can always fine tune
Yes.
that. I mean, we
Making
can always
sure
fine
everybody's
tune
on the
that.
same page, yeah. All right, so that was motion, that was seconded. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor?
All right.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, passed. All right, so Ethan, you want to continue?
All right, so now we get into, the way I had it set up is pretty much the technical requirements. So what do we want out of the kiosk? What do we want out of any software that comes with it? So when you see, if I can scroll up, so a lot of the language, it's fun. It's a lot of it, I just kind of cherry picked from other municipalities that went to a paid parking system. So, for example, some of the scope, the technical requirements, the city requires the mechanic, like the actual kiosk to be secure, reliable, easy to use and maintain, and use current technology for both software and equipment. So I don't know, I think for a lot of these, there might be, I don't know how much arguing there will be, because I don't know, no one's gonna really say I don't want it to be secure, as an example for this. So if there's anything that I read that says hey, I want to talk about that, just interrupt me.
I mean, it looks very good, but of course, you know, the people who are going to, you know, make offers on it may have slightly different requirements or abilities.
Yeah.
So to some extent, I mean, what you've got in here is very inclusive, it's very good.
And we aren't asking for the RFP, the council is.
Right.
So,
Typically, you would have a phrase in here that, you know, please note if there's any of these requirements you're unable to fulfill with your system.
Right,
So that you would know going into it. you know.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's very good.
I would say on G, we probably should accept bills in addition to coins.
What about dollar coins?
Oh,
Or dollar coins.
yeah. One thing I'll say about using dollar bills is Ethan and I met with the team that runs Burlington's parking system last year. And one of the things they brought up is the relative rate of failure and jams when you're talking about inserting bills into a kiosk versus inserting coins. And it's much higher, and it ups the maintenance cost significantly on the system.
Probably better off just with coins.
so
and
dollar
credit
coins
cards.
at least though, right?
But anywhere you get.
If,
Not that
Any
many
coin.
people have dollar coins.
Yeah, I mean, we can include,
We could see if they offer it.
If
That
they
might be
offer it,
something
yeah.
that may not be.
I gotta believe most people are gonna use credit cards.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, the majority of people are gonna use credit cards, so yeah, the coins are, at least I view it as a secondary option for most people, but yeah, it is important that we include it.
Yeah, for the people who may not have, because if as later we talk about a smartphone, if someone doesn't have a credit card and they have, 50 cents in their pocket, that's enough to cover the parking, for example. That's why I still feel like we should incorporate coins or some form of cash. But the
What about-
bills is up for debate. And do we accept bills, do we want $1 bills, do we want $5 bills? Because it all depends on what the system and the software is actually able to read and maintain, so.
Everyone I talk to said bills is a big problem.
With the maintenance of the
With
equipment.
it jamming, with the whole accuracy of it, and most people, well, like you said, have coins, if they know they're coming to the city, they go into a business and get coins. But bills is good if they get wet, if they're not completely straight, it causes a big problem.
Yeah, and for every hour of downtime on a kiosk, that's lost revenue for the city, and that's inconvenience for the people who are parking on that street who have to go and find the next nearest kiosk.
And they'll just go away. They're not gonna go necessarily to go up in the street to find another kiosk.
What about Canadian currency? Any
That's a
options?
great point.
That's a good
Yeah,
point.
You're gonna need that because obviously we don't wanna capture any user in theory would be Canadian tourism. So that would be something I can add, both US and.
I would say you don't want Canadian coins.
Yeah,
Don't.
yeah, when I go to Canada, I come with Canadian currency.
Okay.
When they come down, they come with US currency. So, sorry there.
I
You
guess-
do have the issue of exchange rate
Okay.
if you accept Canadian currency.
Could be a jobs program, maybe instead of a kiosk, we just get a person to stand there.
Well, I've yet to see one that actually uses dual currency. I mean, if you go to Burlington or Lake Placid.
Yeah, I haven't either, actually.
You know, just based on observation.
I'm paranoid to use my
Anyone
card,
seen one of
since
these
I always
dual
use
currency?
Mhm.
Me too.
Do we have any idea how many companies can provide these sorts of things?
Oh, God, I've gotten solicitations from at least a dozen different ones since we started having these public conversations.
Competition, that's what we need.
Yeah.
Unless I missed it, I didn't see any request in here from the responder on how many and location of the meters within the district.
Yeah, the plan is to leave some of that up to their discretion and their professional experience about what works best. Of course, we're gonna have to put some limits on it, so it doesn't turn into a very expensive proposition for the city. But if you guys have any thoughts on how to phrase that, I'm
Are
all
we
ears.
looking, if we're looking at kiosks, don't they just spit out a piece of paper you put in the window?
Yeah.
I mean, so you've got maybe 4 or 5, you don't have that many.
Yeah, it's a question of, so how many spaces can one kiosk cover without inconveniencing people, or, yeah.
Isn't it mainly distance from the kiosk to your parking space?
Mhm.
Right.
Yep.
There's gonna be a lot of them.
There's gonna be quite a few, yeah, considering the.
I think you
boundaries
should,
we
I think you should word it that we want your recommendation. I
Yeah.
mean, that's what you do with an
As
RFP.
That's
per
what-
industry
that was
standards
the idea.
or
I
something
mean,
like that.
if you interview, I would expect that you might bring the top 2 or 3 in to meet with, and you can ask them, you know, why do you have so many? Or how, do you think you can get away with less than you have here if you're trying to
Or you can
save
start
money?
with less and always add more.
Yeah, as an example, we could put language in saying cost per unit or cost for their whole suggestion as well. So if we decide they're proposing, let's say at first 10 kiosks and we would only want 8, we can.
I mean, if you look at, there's 2 proposals and there's a difference in cost, but you see that one is proposing 20 kiosks and the other's proposing 30, you
there's a
could take that
disconnect.
into consideration, you know, when you're reviewing the proposals.
Also maintenance stock, because it's inevitable, either someone's gonna run one over with a car, or
A loader.
smash one with a bat,
Yeah.
so something should be included in that, you know, their recommendation on, you know, maintenance stock, whether it's a couple spare units, or, you know.
Well, do these companies typically provide maintenance of these things themselves, or would that become the city's responsibility? I mean, maybe they have repair services.
That'd be great.
It depends on the contract.
Yeah,
Some
some of
it would
them-
be like, is it a certain amount of time, they'll come and replace it, sometimes it's training, sometimes, the example, the K meters, they do a thing where they recommend X amount of spare units, spare parts of each for every 5 units, you wanna have at least this much of spare parts.
You're not
to
gonna
cover.
wanna hear this, but other cities, the public works departments get trained by the people that sell the machines.
That's exactly what he wanted to hear.
Yeah, it's fantastic, Carol, thank you.
I've
Sit
been
down,
told
Carol.
they're very easy to maintain and repair, so.
So when the one gets run over by the car, then they can fix it.
What about integration of the permit system? Like if we do end up going forward with day passes or employee passes, I think we ought to ask if there's a way that there can be codes issued or whatever that they can.
Well, I guess that comes to also how we want to eventually enforce those as well. So we could put in language talking about how any previous experience with working with the permit system
Yeah.
and how that applies.
Yeah.
Good point, though. I mean, a lot of the places you go with the kiosks, they also have an app that goes with it. So you can just do it from your phone, if you have a phone. But you may not want to have the passes. Why do you want another administrative thing? If somebody wants to park all day, they can feed their phone, you know?
I thought the permits were going to be
Yeah.
an interim.
Yeah, I thought they were kind of a temporary thing until.
Yeah.
I've been asked by several people, where do you get them and when do they start?
I told them to go to your office.
They're willing to pay the price, they're willing.
They're available downstairs in the finance department.
Another update with the parking trial permits, 20 have been sold
Hey.
Where do you get them though?
down at finance department.
Where?
Yeah, right at
Planning
the
department?
front counter
Yeah.
downstairs.
Yeah, finance,
Yep.
yeah.
So 20 total.
20 total, yeah.
Are they repeat
Are
customers?
they monthly or are they daily?
Some people have.
Those are
One
daily.
person bought 8, for an example. Our Chamberlain, he's off on.
So they're not for specific days, you can buy them and use them
Like a booklet?
whenever you want, exactly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're valid for as long as the program is in existence.
I don't get it.
Are you gonna refill?
I thought they had to be
lots of
by
stops if
day.
you have any left?
No, they are. You would
They're only
buy-
good for 1 day, but
So you buy, like, I want to buy one for the week, I get 8 tickets or 7 tickets?
Yes, that would be one way. When we originally proposed this, it was the idea was more for the juror situation for individuals who only needed that one time, because we know that wouldn't be a long-term solution for employees or residents to
So
come in and buy
each one is
day.
dated though, right?
Yes,
Somehow?
that's
Okay.
the plan.
Okay.
And that was the requirement too. For anyone who purchases more than, or plans to distribute them, there's an acknowledgement form that comes along with it that mandates that they return receipts and, show proof that they were following the rules and regulations that we push forward.
When you give me a chance to talk, other cities combine the day permit and the.
There's a-
Whenever
All right.
that gives you a chance to talk.
There's a chair, right?
Yeah. All right, so any other comments on the tech requirements?
did a really good job, I think.
Okay.
And expenses, you are going to put in here what the cost of their system is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can't remember if I saw that in there.
That's not in this version yet, because I wanted to talk about how much.
Because I would think that that'd be a pretty important piece of information.
That is
Yeah,
a
yeah,
big
yeah.
piece of info. All right, so we've had a couple of comments, Canadian currency, maintenance stock size, so we'll address those. I don't think it's necessary to do a motion for those. But let's move on to the next section, which is submission requirements. It's basically statement of qualifications and background and references. And this will be fleshed out, of course, to include other pieces of information. Again, this is a first draft.
There must be a standard set that the city chamberlain or city clerk.
For submission requirements?
Yeah,
Yeah, it varies a little bit from RFP to RFP, but yeah, we've got it, and we'll include it in here.
okay.
I wouldn't necessarily limit it to 3 references. I mean, if they can give you a list of 20 places that they have active systems, I think you would want to know those 20.
So you just, in language here it says a minimum 3. so
Yeah,
you would-
I would say, up to,
Up to.
Yeah.
whatever number, 25, 30, whatever you want to put in. They probably have a boilerplate that they send out with these things, so.
If they only got 3 references, they're probably not gonna be in business long.
Well, and I'd rather you have the opportunity to select among 25, 30, instead of giving the 3 that they're
Yeah.
giving, force feeding you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Good point.
All right, any other discussion about the submission requirements? All right, so it's the submission of proposals. They'll all come to me here at City Hall. Selection and award of contract.
So they're coming to you, not the city clerk.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so selection of award of contract. The city makes certain reservations. It's the intention that once we get responses to this RFP, that the advisory committee will consider them as a whole. We will put together a scoring rubric based on the selection criteria that we will include here. And then the committee will be given an opportunity to score the proposals on their own, and then we'll discuss it as a group. And likely for something of this size and importance, we'll select 3 or 4 finalists and ask them to either send representatives for an in-person interview or something along those lines. And then based on the results of those interviews, we'll make a final recommendation to the Common Council.
And there's also potential that maybe we could always suggest like a pilot program of a couple different ones, and then figure out which one we like the most, and then fully purchase as well. So we have some options moving forward.
Any comments on that?
That looks good.
Okay. All right, Ethan, you want to go through?
The expenses part, that's pretty standard, essentially
yeah.
saying any of the bidders, when the work they produce for us to review, we're not paying for that, that's all on their own dime. This is pretty much boilerplate language.
Yep. Hold harmless is simply indemnification for the city. And reserved rights, just some things that the city keeps to protect itself during the process. And that's all. The last 3 sections there, that's pretty standard. We include in all the RFPs the city releases.
One thing we need to think about is by the time we issue this, let's say we make the corrections, we adopt this, we send it forward, we send it out Friday as an example. How long do we want for the bidding process to take? Do we want to give it a month? Do we want to give it, that's something that we need to define in this too.
30 days, if they've got their stuff together, they should be able to do it.
And that gives them enough time, if they want to come here
Yeah.
and take a look firsthand, they'll have enough
Yeah.
time to do that.
And we'll have a guided tour of the area for anybody who wants to send representatives. We'll take them around, show them exactly what we're looking for.
It's usually typically in like the halfway point.
Yeah. right, so any other questions or comments on the RFP? Okay, so we'll have a motion for the city to make some of the additions and consider a few of the other things that the committee here has recommended. And then, once it's been reviewed by city attorney and the mayor's office, we will release it and see what comes back.
I make a motion to that effect.
Second. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Passed. All right, so now is the time when we invite members of the public to come and address the committee on any issues of concern regarding parking.
Bill Badger.
You're on camera, Bill. Careful.
No. That's why I'm trying to turn away from it. I just wanted some clarification on the proposal for Court Street for the one-way and the diagonal parking. Rodney alluded before in the first meeting, there is tractor trailers that come in there trying to back up to the loading dock, and right now they take up both lanes to do that.
I've actually been on the site with Ethan and showed him that.
So I mean, if that's going to be a one lane, I think they even use it, going to all Wrigley's if they have to get back in there. So, I just know if you guys had brought that into consideration.
Yeah, they're going to have to make sure that they have enough allowance to do that.
And also, the availability on Oak Street, I think it's a little skewed right now because we still do have county employees that are still parking around Trinity's and around others that are out there. They're environmental workers, they go park there and they know they have to go out and investigate, so I don't think.
Yeah, there's some part-time employees that know that they're only going to be there for a couple hours. They find 2-hour parking, and if it's closer, they'll park there.
Yeah, one thing I addressed last meeting, you weren't here, is there is no enforcement of the parking over there at the government center.
We've actually talked.
Yeah, we've had discussions
to the
with
city
about that.
And the paperwork that Buildings and Grounds gives out to new hires, it says at the bottom, the city does that, which they haven't done that for 15 years.
Well, they haven't done that since the last time they had an enforcement officer, and they're not doing it now.
Yeah, and I think that may be what we're trying to do with that seed notice go out to our department, all the other departments, to have people, is this your car, is this your tag that goes to your car for the parking and everything, so maybe that's in the process.
Yeah, we've talked about it internally. Our preference would be for if the city's interested, they would patrol our lot. They would keep any revenue if there's violations. Failing that, we would talk to our sheriff's department.
Right, and I told you before, I've gone through there, and there could be county employees, but there's no sticker on them.
Yeah.
So, all right.
Yeah, it's easier to patrol our lot than it would be anywhere else because it either has a sticker or it doesn't. You're either in violation or a juror's permit. On the
only thing maybe if that does happen, do like they did at the city, give a warning out for say this because it hasn't been patrolled in such a long time. Have a warning ticket said, within a month it's going to be an actual ticket.
And that would only be till 5 o'clock.
Right,
if people from or going to Olive Ridley's after hours, we don't mind them parking in our parking lot. They do now, and
taxis are over there all the time. So, Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other members of the public wish to address the committee?
One question I had, when you're talking about parking structure, you're talking about a parking garage or a tiered parking? Because one of the things that Public Works had talked about was that there was a difficulty with maintenance. And in other cities that have dealt with parking problems, they've worked on a plan to include tiered parking, but the top level obviously is covered, and the walls are high enough that no snow comes in. So I don't know if you're talking about maintenance of the structure with deterioration over time, or are you talking about snow clearing? You
would have to address both, Carol, if we're going to go down that road.
But at the moment, that's off the table.
At the moment, that's off the table. But yeah, the primary concern with Public Works would have, number one, would be actual day-to-day maintenance. Obviously, in winter season, is snow removal.
But if it's-
If you have an open top structure, that means you have to carry snow from the top floor all the way down.
Yeah.
Unless you can dump it over the side, but because we have such tight property boundaries, I don't see that happening.
Yeah, I don't even see that as being feasible for our area to have something that's open.
Well, they do it all the time, because the one down Durkee Street is open top.
No, but the point I'm trying to make is that if, I'm hoping that we do go down that road at some point, tiered parking or something that is somewhat of, there are various levels of structures and you build a sub-base so you can eventually build on. But it would have to be, it wouldn't even make sense to have something in our area that's not covered and the sides high enough to prevent snow from coming in. That to me is, you know.
But you have
waste of
one
money.
right now down at Durkee Street.
I didn't suggest that, and I didn't.
You didn't design that, Carol?
And I personally helped put that together, Carol, but what I'm telling you is that that's one of those things that needs to be addressed, yes, if we
Right.
get to that.
If we
And
go
also,
there.
long-term deterioration. Now, if you go over to Burlington, their structures have tops on them, and
Yeah.
they work very well.
Yeah, and every
But they're
city,
very
and
expensive.
I'll get to that in a minute, I've talked to 4 cities, every city I've spoken to have all incorporated some kind of parking structure. And all of them are with sides tall enough and strong enough to support 10, 15 years without having to do maintenance and a roof. So obviously there's lighting involved because you don't have as much natural light and it's much more costly, and I understand all that. So since it's off the table, we'll get that off the table. But
Maybe not forever.
Bridge Street, Broad Street, where the bridge is, where Bridge Street Auction Parks, we still are getting away from, there's parking there. I still don't hear any discussion with the county and the city on doing anything there because it's primarily used by Bridge Street Auction and the employees now. And I think that that is a site that we should look at tiered parking or something that is some sort of structure so we can gain some parking spaces. So I know that, you know, turnaround and coming in and out and a means of egress, but I've seen parking structures, starting with a sub-base, maybe just building 1 or 2 tiers, have worked in such a small footprint. So I still come back to the committee and ask them why we're still not talking about that, looking at that, maybe to start with surface parking, but I don't know.
Well, I guess I'll respond by saying, if the city's not able to secure any more footprint on Division Street than it appears that they're going to be able to, that's probably the next logic. I think that being centrally located, if they had a larger footprint there, I think that would be the logical part for a structure if we had to build a structure. Failing that, that lot may be the next consideration for a parking structure.
I just think that that area needs to be incorporated in this comprehensive parking plan as one of the solutions. And it's all of this is going to have to be tweaked over 2, 3, 5, 10 years as hopefully we grow. But I think we need to include that in your plan. So I asked the committee to look at that.
Yeah.
The other thing is, St. John's, I know, I had a feeling unfortunately that this is the way it was gonna go.
So did the
They're
city.
protective, that they don't wanna give up any of those parking spaces, and that's used a lot. I mean, they have church all the time, I live on Couch, it's always used. Not all of them, but always used. None of their patrons, except for one white car that I'm sure is not a St. John's patron, parks in the Couch Street corner of Oak Street parking lot. I'm asking you to reach out to St. John's to talk to them about having a serious conversation. I don't know, you don't want to buy
We
it.
did. They're not interested in that conversation either.
Even to allow the city to maintain it and to use those spaces?
No, they said that they are consolidating their administrative operations, the Catholic Church in Plattsburgh, at the St. John's location, and that they are not willing to put any of their parking up for shared use at this time.
Okay, well, I thought that would be a perfect, ideal, yeah, okay. Going back to the Plattsburgh Marina, am I understanding it correctly that the farmer's market, you've had some conversations with the leaders of the farmer's market and you're looking to relocate the farmer's market to Maine and have parking there?
Okay, not the marina, down towards the waterfront, towards the back end of the large parking lot that's down there, more or less adjacent to the water resource recovery facility.
So
Okay,
the west
I'm-
end
Yeah, the west end.
of
So
that parking lot.
yeah,
Okay, I'm glad that it's
Toward-
not in
towards
front
the
of the
west
waterfront,
end of
because
that
I think
parking
that
lot,
would
yes.
be detrimental to the city.
Yeah,
But-
we don't want to ruin the view.
Well, not only that, I mean, you want to be able to have that available for some other use down the road, I would hope.
Mhm.
So are you talking about, to clarify, you're talking west, are you talking behind the DNA Trail though?
Near
Kind
close
of
to
thing?
Green Street,
Closer
right?
to Green?
Not that far. So if you're looking at the plant here and the MLD site right here,
Yeah.
the site that we're looking at is right between them. Like not between them, but kind of to the south of the gap between those two sites.
But you're talking about the paved area that's already been prepared as an infrastructure for parking, right?
No, we're talking about one of the grassy areas in between.
Okay, that's what I'm trying
Yeah,
to.
so we're not taking any
Okay.
parking away to
Okay,
put that
I
building
think
down
that
there.
would be ideal. How likely is that gonna come to fruition at this point?
We are currently exploring the costs of doing a new building down there or relocating their existing building, and those talks are ongoing with the farmers market.
And you're seriously considering something year-round? Because I think that that would be.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. As I said, I've spoken to 4 different cities. I reached out to the planning board of Saratoga. So, surprising or not, Saratoga has no paid parking right now. They've built it into their business core. They don't have any comprehensive plan. So I think we're moving forward in a little bit more of a stride than they're very concerned that they don't have paid parking, and they're regretting it right now. They're bonding for another structure down by the Civic Center, and the cost is obviously, up there. So they encourage us, obviously, to go to paid parking.
They
and
do
to
have
work-
paid parking,
But-
private paid parking, but they do
Right,
have.
not city.
And substantial sized lots.
Right, but not city.
Well,
It's
don't say
private.
they don't have paid.
Okay.
It's all,
Not
as
city.
far as you know,
Private.
Dave, it's all privately
It's
owned.
private,
Yes.
and it's privately monitored,
Yep.
and it's privately,
Yep.
and
It's,
they.
it's a, it's a significant footprint.
Right. The mayor I spoke to, Craig Coranda was nice enough, the mayor of Lake Placid, to spend more than an hour on the phone with me today, to speak about what they've been doing and what they're going to do. And they actually combined paid permits for their residents, and also employees can, they don't discriminate, it's gotta be a resident, it's gotta be an employee, they just, if you want a paid permit, you can purchase one. He thinks that their plan is annually, you can prorate that. I think that we should encourage to incorporate.
Where does that allow them to park?
There are designated areas on the street at parking signs that say during certain times. There's some that are designated that allow them to park, it has to be worked out with snow removal, obviously. They do snow removal from 2 a.m. on. And I said that our snow removal is a little more comprehensive, and I think that our snow removal works better. But if, for example, college students they have, right now, what they're finding is that even though there's businesses downtown, mostly tourists, are parking during certain times downtown on the city street. But what they're finding is that most of the time, employees that work at the restaurants are parking right in front of the businesses, and that's where they've been having their problems, is to have a good marriage between the residents that need parking, or the tenants actually that live downtown, and the employees that work right in the restaurants. So he's tried to encourage the use of the trolley to bring them to the parking lots that are only like 10 blocks away. He's not having a lot of success with that. I think that, and they have a parking system in place where it's more expensive to park right on the street in front of a business than for the parking. He says it's about 4 times as much, but I think that what we're trying to do, where we have a center area where we have paid parking and the outlying areas are free, I think that you're gonna see that more college students maybe will be parking, outside and not, or pay for that parking. But I think that we should consider, and I hear that it's temporary, but I think that we should consider as a city having some paid permits, but be a little bit, not discriminate, but selective in how we might use that, to incorporate that maybe during the peak times when we have the college students here. It would generate some income into the city, and you could use those permits, all for the 24 hours or in a certain, certain sections. He also uses that in some of his parking lots. So there's designated areas where that has a sign that says paid permits can park in these spots. And what they do, and Portsmouth and some other cities had problems with some enforcement, is on the permit, they'll have the license plate. Because I said, why don't you have the license plate? Because they've had trouble with family members using those permits for, you know, a number of vehicles. So you have a paid permit and it goes with that particular vehicle, and that's a way to enforce that. What he's been experiencing is that he's thinking, because the kiosks, and one thing I want to remind the city here, the committee, we have a lot of college students with a lot of vandalism, and so these kiosks are expensive. They're maybe $8,000 a piece. It depends on what you use. And so there's going to be vandalism, and you know, I am concerned, especially once they know that there's cash in some of the machines. You're going to have more vandalism. So I ask you to maybe be selective about which kiosks and the location of where you use to allow them to use coins. Because even if it's not a lot of money, when college students get drunk, they don't care, the word gets out, they're going to, you know, take that machine and drag it home, and, you know, you'd be surprised.
Carol, I would say that, especially on Clinton Street now, most of us have a pretty good camera system, and it covers the whole block. I have a system of 4, 2 in the back, 2 in the front. Lady across the street has 5, the tobacco shop. So I think that for the most part, you know, if these things are located near businesses, you're going to see that there is some pretty good observations.
Mary Ann, did you happen to catch on the camera whoever set that car on fire in Clinton Street this past weekend?
Well, actually, we are trying to retrieve it because it's the one camera that we had that was down.
And that's
But
what
the guy's coming tomorrow, and he said there's no possibility it didn't record, so we should have it.
And that's what I hear also from some of the other cities, is that they have some camera systems in place, and you can't always rely on them. I'm just saying, obviously, we have to have accommodation.
Well, lots of
We have
things
to have
go
some-
wrong, and college students are college students, but you know, on the whole, very honestly, I mean, I used to live on the corner of Couch and Helen. They took my whole fence down over time. But, you know, on the whole, I mean, I think that they're not that bad. We've had some incidents, but over the last couple of years, it's gotten better.
It has gotten better. I just want to put that out there, that when you're placing the ones.
It's due to the
that-
hard work of the city police department, I think.
Yeah.
There's language in the RFP about such as a vandal-resistant window, and there's going to be other things with a steel box
Carol, we
for
need
the
to move
cash.
along because other people have some comments too. So
Yeah.
if you've got a couple more, if you could
Yeah.
get to them quickly.
So I don't know if you're thinking about solar or what you're thinking about for kiosks, but, you know, there's obviously some problems, the more high-tech you get.
It depends on what they do.
The director of parking of Portsmouth, New Hampshire, has emailed me information on what they're doing. They just started implementing a comprehensive plan in the last few months. So they're just working on it, but they've had a lot of surveys, they've done a lot of studies, they've, you know, done a lot of research. He reached out to Baltimore, Maryland, and they have an extremely comprehensive, long time in place parking plan. And he's emailing me contact information, which I'm willing to forward over to Ethan, because I'm not going to do that.
That's great.
Yeah, please do.
So I'll email that over. Mr. Randall, for the mayor of Lake Placid, also said that they don't have a comprehensive plan. It's kind of been going steep by their pants and, you know, to band and trying to rework it. But I would be glad to share any of that information too. So
Okay.
thank you for your hard work.
Yeah, thank you, Carol. Any other members of the public wish to address the committee?
One thing I wanted to mention was the comparison, which was done early on when the meeting was done.
Could you just identify yourself?
I'm sorry, Tammy Broderick. Sorry. The comparison was done early on when there was that first initial meeting before this committee started, when Prime was here discussing the plans and everything, and there was a gentleman in the group who was comparing our downtown to Burlington. And, you know, he was speaking about, you know, walking and doing this thing, he doesn't have a car anymore and stuff like that, which I think is wonderful. But I'm hoping we're not still basing a lot of what's going on in Plattsburgh with what, you know, goes on in Burlington, because we don't have that, we don't have the public transportation like they do to the effect, and like comparing us like has been done in the past as well with Montreal, we don't have a subway system. We don't, like the bigger cities, we can't flag down a cab at any given moment to do that. So I'm just hoping that we're still comparing apples to apples, not apples to oranges.
Yeah, no, we all recognize there are vast differences between Burlington and the city of Plattsburgh, and the system that we're looking to design will be based on the realities of Plattsburgh, not Burlington.
Perfect, perfect. And then also, going forward with the parking, and it's just another comparison, wondering if some of the other cities that we've compared our downtown to have the same types of public access companies, businesses, like the municipalities, the JCEO, we have the federal building, we have the city municipality, we have the county municipality, we have state buildings, and so forth. If the comparisons are made to those types of organizations in those areas versus ours, because we have all those things right here downtown, and I don't think some of those cities do. And then the other thing was, again, with the paid parking, and it's kind of a money thing, and I'm just wondering how feasible it would be for people who work here every single day to have to pay for parking. And I think I mentioned it last time, none of us are getting rich at our jobs. So it does make, over time, for a year. Sorry, I'm getting.
Excuse me, didn't Joe Musso mention that that's in your county contracts, that they have to provide?
I wasn't here last time I had the flu.
Rodney covered that.
Yeah, I mean, the county's pretty committed to, what, we
know
fully
that. That's why the
anticipate.
city wants you to help.
Yeah, we fully anticipate that there's gonna be a cost, whatever solution is developed, there's gonna be a cost, and the county's gonna have to bear some of that cost. We're not going to put it on the backs of our employees.
Well, that's good to hear, because that was a concern. And the other concern is, and I hope that this committee does really consider this too, and I said it last time, I know I sound like a broken record, but a lot of the clients that we serve at DSS, it's not just us that I'm concerned about losing that parking. We have elderly, we have vulnerable people in our community that access our building. We have children, I mean, a lot of mentally ill people too. And to have them walk blocks to come to the building, it's a hardship.
Can I ask you how many handicap spots you have in the lot that's right there?
You mean our
behind
client
Social-
parking?
Yes.
I'm guessing.
Probably a handful.
I think there's like 5 or 6 that are
Maybe you should
really
have a
close.
special, maybe there should be like a special needs section.
Well, there is. I think there's like, because we did for security purposes create a separate employee entrance within the last few years.
Right.
We put up cameras in the back because there are issues that go on. It can be sketchy coming in and out of there sometimes.
We also have, I don't know if you have any idea, Terry, I haven't asked John, I've asked John Redden a number of questions. One question I haven't asked him is, how many employees of the Department of Social Services job requires them to come in for a short period of time, maybe collect some paperwork, and then go back out, and then maybe come back during. So they're in and out during the day. So we have to make sure there's a number of spots that are available for that. Obviously, if you're parking too far away, it doesn't make sense for those employees.
Right, and I can't give you specific numbers, but it happens often, and it's not just paperwork that they're bringing back and forth, it's car seats, it's briefcases filled with items that they may be bringing to a family. Sometimes it's bags loaded with, they may have a family that's destitute that they're bringing. And we do it right in the building. We'll put out emails saying, a family in need that needs this size clothing,
But you
these
also
kinds of
could
household,
have
but
just a
they're running
loading
them.
zone. You could have a loading zone, where you
You
have, but that's what I'm saying. I mean,
Right.
this is something for the county to look at, say, we've got 5 spots right by the door, it's loading zone only for people bringing things in and out.
You know, we may have to relook
Sure,
at
yeah.
what we provide for parking now and redesign it differently.
We understand that, I mean, we're very cognizant of the.
And it is
of
a
the special
security
needs
issue
you
too
guys.
for those families that have children in foster care. Sometimes you've got very violent members of the family, and they're looking to see where people are coming and going. They're looking to see how they can get access to a child that they no longer have visitation and stuff like that. I mean, so it is a sensitive area. And I'll reiterate, I'm not worried about me walking 1 or 2 blocks. Is it more difficult in the winter? I have asthma, so yes, it's more difficult for me to walk that far in the winter. I can't breathe after a certain amount of time. When it's 95 degrees out in the summer, thank God it's not often, but it happens. Again, it's hard to breathe when you have to walk too far. It's not a matter of being comfortable or lazy or spoiled. It's just, sometimes there's health reasons involved too. What else? Oh, and I was going to gonna bring up what Carol just mentioned too, about where the auction house area is on Broad Street, if that's been considered for maybe somewhere down the road, if things don't pan out, to perhaps look into building a parking structure there. Because
Don't make Carol that happy.
well, and I kind of whispered to my friend that I was sitting with, I said, I'm just gonna say that. So, but anyway, I just want to reiterate, that would be a good spot, because it is close, and it's close enough for clients that may be coming in, going to the building.
How much of that parking lot, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, would you say is utilized by DSS employees?
I can't give you an accurate answer to that. I know I work 9 to 5. Some of our people work 8 to 4. When I come in for 9 o'clock, it might be between 8:30 and 8:40. It's pretty full. So,
I would assume the first choice would be Durkee Street for most of the employees before that long. It's just a little further.
Yeah, it's not a lot further. It's not far at all.
Would it be possible for you to canvass, send out a survey of DSS employees to ask them what they currently do for parking on weekdays?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that'd be good to have for discussion
And I just wanted to clarify too, when I wasn't here last time, Bill was nice enough to give you guys some photos of the Durkee Street parking lot. I was the one that had a friend who works in the West Holcomb building. She took those at different times, different days, and it wasn't to show you, yes, it's full all the time. It was to show you this is what you have to make up for. You know, it's full during the day.
Would you say that it is more frequently full since the January 1st when the city started their enforcement?
No, I would say there's less people in the 2-hour parking. I don't know where they're going now.
There's less people in the parking lot?
No, the 2-hour parking.
The front row.
The very front row,
yeah.
that's right along.
Oh, well, that makes sense.
Yeah, so there's fewer cars parked there. But generally during the day, it's full. And I can say, like, and I'll give you an example this morning when I pulled into the parking lot. I had to wait because there were people that parked and they were literally coming out of the parking lot to go up the walkway that leads between JCEO to go up to Margaret Street to go to their jobs up there. So it's not just the people that live and work on the Durkee Street side. There's people that work up on the other
sure.
side that go opposite.
Yeah, it's the primary lot. So.
Yeah. So I just wanted to make sure that, you know, it's not only a county issue, it really is everybody. And that was it. That was brief enough.
Thank you very much.
I just have like 2 to 3 things. I'm Darcy Rennie. So I had a question for you guys. The PowerPoint that you guys did tonight, is there a way for others to see that? Because all we saw was kind of the pieces and bits that you guys had put up here tonight. So I didn't know if that was something that is for public.
Can that go on the website?
Yeah, we can put it on the website.
Okay, is it not on the website right now, or is it?
We just got it
Don't
on the
believe
website.
so, yeah.
Okay, so in regards to that, one of the things.
Yeah, the PowerPoint or the spreadsheet or the RFP?
I was just gonna say, pretty much everything that we've seen here.
Sorry.
Okay. No, I just,
I appreciate that. The other thing I had a question about was I think it was in the PowerPoint, was when you guys talk about the parking that you did the counts for back in September, on September 20th.
Oh, the usage
18?
statistics, the raw data, yeah.
So is that something that they can look at redoing or trying to do it again now that the parking enforcement is in effect? Is that something that they're willing to do, to kind of look at the usage now?
I mean, it's
That's
something we
in
could look at, but that's a significant commitment of resources to get that level of data. Again, that was part of a over $10,000, study that was done by the
What
city.
we have been doing, Darcy, is we have had people trying to keep track of how many empty spaces.
That's kind of, I guess, what I was
So
going
we're
with.
kind of
Yeah, I
doing
wasn't necessarily thinking of hiring
The
a
code
company.
enforcement officer who walks the streets, couldn't he kind of, I mean, is that something that he can?
Well, she's got a job to do. She can't be.
No, but I mean, when she tickets, I mean, some of that information will kind of impact this as well.
I think you need another person for that. That's a lot.
No,
Yeah, that's a lot for one person to do. And one of the other benefits of the kiosk system, once it's implemented, it can tell you exactly what the usage is on any street at any given time. It can tell you how many spaces are open, and you can just pull it right off of the.
I guess my concern about that was it was done at a time when they weren't enforcing the 2-hour parking. So how much is being utilized now versus then, I guess, is what I was kind of looking at.
I think it would be considerably different.
I do.
yeah,
I
it
think
would
it would be very
be.
different.
A lot of
That's
empty
why.
spaces.
Yeah. So the only other thing I had was kind of tying into that is, so when you talk about the parking spaces from the, the Glens Falls Bank, at this point, you're saying that 109 of them are what you could actually pull through right now?
Right now, yeah, that's what we're reasonably confident we can get, given the footprint and the other constraints that we're working under.
Okay. So when you talk about, and I don't know if anyone has any idea about this, but when you're talking about parking in the city versus in the summer versus the winter, I guess I'm a little bit concerned about how many spaces do we lose to snow removal and or snow buildup. Because I do see that now. I do see when people park on the side of the road, they don't park in the one spot. They park in like half of one, half of the other if they can't see the lines. They park in different areas or further up than they can normally park because of the snow that's sitting there and impacting the parking spaces. So I feel like we're getting down to the nitty-gritty of, hey, we're saying exactly this many parking spaces, but it's not necessarily what could potentially be used in the middle of the winter if we're having snow issues or snow removal issues, I guess. So I just want to keep in mind that we say, I mean, from what you put up there tonight, it's 177 spaces potentially if you only get the small piece of the Glens Falls parking lots. So that's...
Well, the one thing you want to remember is that when we're talking about the spaces that we need, a lot of those are people that are just here during the day too. And so for the emergency snow parking, I mean, when we're looking to replace 189 slots for the, you know, employees of social services, they're not there after 5. So, you know, those spaces will be available and, you know, they're going to be
I was just saying, right now, like with over at Oak Street and over at the government center, we're about to lose a half a dozen spots because of snow buildup.
Right.
Because they can only put the other highway over there.
That's what I'm saying, it's not necessarily the parking bans, but the actual snow push of where the snow is being placed during the winter time. Right, because it's not being removed, it's actually just being pushed into a pile.
I suspect the city does that now, the county does that, but not regularly. You know, when you get to a certain extent, they'll go in and they'll remove it all.
Absolutely, yeah. So, but it's not all the time consistent, so there is times where there is multiple spaces that it's taking up, so. And that's it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Patrick.
Any other, I will just note that Councilor McFarland has joined the meeting just in time. Any other comments from the public?
Can I just mention that snow removal is a solution, just quick?
Just very quick, Carol.
One thing that was mentioned at 2 meetings ago, I think, is that there's a lot of wasted space on the parking lot down by the marina for sand and salt, etc. And if we're going to do a comprehensive plan, and I'm assuming that some of these...
It's actually snow storage currently. Now, what will happen is if we start utilizing more of that Dock Street parking lot,
that's where I'm going.
that means that I'm going to have to find other places to bring that snow. That's snow from downtown. So we have the clock ticks on us. Once the snow event ends, we have to clean up downtown.
So if I could mention something, that's where I'm going with this. Okay, I have a solution, not as big, maybe. The city owns at the end what?
Never.
It's a bad solution? You're teasing me?
No,
Keep going, keep going.
Keep going,
Okay.
please.
Anyways, at the end of Macomb Street, the city owns that between where the warehouse is, Bouillet Bakery, okay? There's a small parking lot there, it's not utilized. I don't know why the city doesn't work that into this plan for snow removal and banking snow, because that is something that's close enough to the center city that would be a solution. Not as big, but I think it's worth looking at.
Yeah.
Okay, we will look at that. Thank you, Carol.
Good, thank you, Carol.
Any other members of the public wish to speak? All right, seeing none, do I have a motion to adjourn? Ethan, do I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, thanks, everybody.
Terry. Where did you get the figure 190 employees?
I'm sure it's closer, like.
Because when you go on the county's telephone system, it maybe.
Is that?
Yeah, that's what I thought.
My coworker was today. I thought it was like roughly 175, 180.
Oh, okay. And that includes all the part-timers as well. I don't know how many part-timers.